It's interesting comparing what the online gaming community says about certain releases and comparing it to the reality. The narrative in 2023 was that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom was a complete and total flop. Nobody liked it. It was just a rehash of Breath of the Wild, which no one wanted. There was just this insistent agenda from game journalists, from YouTubers, desperately trying to downplay this game. And 2 years later, I still find myself playing it. I still find myself thinking about it. I still find myself loving it. I've been talking about this game for over a year now, and it's become apparent to me, seeing the discussion about this game online, seeing people talk, share stories, talk about their favorite moments, show certain images from the game, right? Seeing this thing continue to be talked about so long after release, it really just goes to show you just how impressive and monumental this game actually is. When you really stop and look at how this game is being discussed online, it's very clear that this game has left a major, major impact on gamer culture. It's it pushed boundaries when it came to its technical abilities. It reinvented what Breath of the Wild did. It has this gripping emotional story. Like Breath of the Tears of the Kingdom just stomps at all the other similar lesser games that came out around the same point. Games like Baldur's Gate 3, Elden Dingaling, Cyberpunk 2077, Star failed, right? Like the list goes on and on and on. The reality is there is nothing in Zelda genre that even comes close to matching what it does. The most anybody has been able to do when complaining about Zelda is try and say that like, oh, Elden Ring is more difficult. It's not. Or like, well, Baldur's Gate 3 gives you more options. Like, first of all, like you're comparing two different you're comparing two completely different genres. An RPG versus an action adventure game. So you are going to downplay Zelda for not having the RPG aspects that the RPG enjoys. If you're going to compare RPG franchises, you may as well compare Baldur's Gate 3 to Xenoblade, right? But if you were to do that, it would become apparent very, very quickly that Baldur's Gate 3 is not as good as Xenoblade. Like, Xenoblade stomped Baldur's Gate 3 in every single way, shape, and form. And it's not even really something that really comes up in these discussions. Just how much Nintendo has surpassed even the most overhyped of their competition, right? Last year the Game Awards tried to give their award to Astro bought and paid for, right? They tried pushing this narrative that this was some cutting edge platforming game, that nothing like it had ever been seen before or since, and that it was this big deal. And Donkey Kong Country Returns HD outperformed it. It was a better game. It was on a better console. It featured more popular characters, right? Like there was nothing Astrobot could do to compete with Donkey Kong, right? And that wasn't even like a new release, right? To me, that's the same thing that's happening with Tears of the Kingdom, right? Every time someone starts shilling some game or like hyping something up, whether it's Black Myth Wukong or Stellar Blade or whatever, Mediocre Blade, like um, whether it's GTA 6 or whatever, like nothing that is going to come out in the near future is going to be as good as The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Much like Breath of the Wild before it, the things that this game does will not be imitated by any game ever. Like Breath of the Wild came out 8 years ago now. I believe to the date almost 8 years ago, Breath of the Wild came out. And not a single game has been able to capture those mechanics, that feeling, that vibe, that mystique. Nothing even came close. Our Red Dead Redemption 2 was basically a cover corridor shooter that forced you to walk from point A to point B. There were no deviations allowed in Rockstar's mission structure. Okay, there was no creativity. What you did was extremely limited, all to tell the story that they wanted to tell. RDR2 was a complete and total joke compared to Breath of the Wild. And the same is going to be true for Grand Theft Auto 6. It's going to be the same exact game as Grand Theft Auto 3. You're going to run around in an open space and you're going to shoot cops and jump in a car to get away from them, right? That is Grand Theft Auto. There is no evolution, there is no growth, there is no creativity. It is the same exact thing you've been getting since 2001. In 2001, we got Majora's Mask. In 2002, we got The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. You know, in 2004, we got Four Swords Adventures. And 2005, we got Minish Cap. We got 2006, we got Twilight Princess. 2007, we got Phantom Hourglass. 2011, we got The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. And in 2017, we got The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. All of these games I just mentioned are radically different in how they work, on how they function, what they do, their visual styles, the mechanics, the features within them. Any one of these games shows more creativity and ingenuity than anything Rockstar has ever slapped onto your plate. Like all Bethesda can do is just make bigger and emptier open worlds with nothing to do with them. All Larian can do is front load a bunch of their content into the first 20 hours to create the illusion that there's this big, open, sprawling narrative, and then slowly start constricting it as you go get to Act 2 and beyond, right? Like the reality of the AAA gaming scene, right? The reality of this of Nintendo's competitors is that none of them ever have or ever will be on Nintendo's level, right? They don't have the talent, they haven't built up the IP, they don't have the versatility, they can't take like any liberties with their IP. It takes way too long to produce games. That's like an issue that I think a lot of people aren't talking about. Like it's going to be several years before we see a follow up to Red Dead Redemption 2 or Grand Theft Auto 6. And how many Zelda games are we going to get in between that? How many Nintendo consoles? How many like new Mario games, Pokemon, like new IPs we'll see, right? When was the last time you even saw a new IP out of one of these studios, right? Everything they put out is a rehash of something else, whether it's an indie game that plagiarizes some Nintendo property, like Stardew Valley or Ant Blast, whether it's like some AAA reboot of some franchise that like only boomers care about, like Baldur's Gate or Devil May Cry, right? No matter what the industry says and does, no matter what happens going forward, like the reality is Nintendo will continue to dominate. We saw in 2023 the gaming journalism industry rally to try and prop absolute bullshit as their game of the year. Right, we've seen what's happened since then. We've seen how gamers have flocked to the Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom and played this game and fallen in love with it, all while Baldur's Gate 3 was forgotten before the Game Awards were even over. Okay. Tears of the Kingdom is still going to be very relevant like 10 to 20 years from now. While Baldur's Gate 3 couldn't even make it past a year. You know, Astrobot couldn't even make it past 2 months. Okay. These are your game of the year contenders. You know, games like It Takes Two are getting disappointing follow ups. You know, Overwatch is completely dead and buried. You know, The Witcher 3 is a complete and total failure, right? Not only is the Witcher storyline closed and done with, their sequel series, Cyberpunk, has completely failed and been forgotten, right? Like whatever people try and say, whatever they try to do, the reality is that Nintendo is the dominant force in gaming.